Pleasure to meet you, Tun Mahathir, and it's to have this conversation with you at a time when the region is changing dramatically. We had the Indian elections recently with a very conservative and maybe very rightist, government coming into power, and then we have Japan, which has also become very conservative, and so on. In the view of many people, you are seen as a big proponent of regionalization, and you were a driver, a very tireless driver of creating your own brand of regionalization in your own time. The question is, as countries become more fundamentalist and as countries become more conservative, and as conservative leaders become, take on power and become important in their respective large economies, how do you tie that in with the prospects of Asia starting to work with each other and creating a real form of regionalization? How do you marry regionalization or internationalization with the need to run a country and meet election promises and so on?
I think by and large the countries of Asia has been much more successful. East Asia in particular has been much more successful in setting up governments and developing their countries. The way they do it, of course, differ one from the other. They do follow the European model, but not wholly. And they have, in the case of China, for example, devised their own way of their own modification of socialist ideology so that they can grow without forgetting that in their system will not be very democratic. They believe in being ruled by elites who are chosen, but they do change leaders. So in a way, they are not establishing authoritarian rule under one man or that. And other countries have taken to democracy much more successfully than you see in the Middle East or in Africa. But we see contradiction in Thailand, of course. But other countries, Indonesia, for example, conducted a very good election recently, and there was no violence, nobody was killed. And I think slowly the governments are improving on their practice of governance, on their practice of democratic principles.
In that regard, Malaysia has an interesting situation where it needs to attract foreign investors, and the foreign investment community is putting pressure on Malaysia on a number of fronts. At the same time, there's a need to build a strong country, as you say. So how does a country like Malaysia deal with this dual challenges?
I would like to claim that Malaysia invented foreign direct investment. Long ago, before people talk of FDI, we were inviting people to come to Malaysia to invest because we need to create jobs for our people. Our interest was not so much gaining money from the foreign investment as to creating jobs for our people. And very soon after independence, we opened up the country, created industrial areas, free trade areas, etc. And people came to invest in Malaysia so much so that we ran short of workers. And we had to allow foreign workers to come and work in Malaysia. So we have always been business friendly, particularly with foreign investors.
But your experience with foreign investors is very interesting because there is a class of foreign investors that are activists. In the old days, it used to be the pension funds like CalPERS and so on. Today, they are more the hedge funds, and they are very they're activists and they're very aggressive, right down to the corporate level. It's not just the country that they put on that they put on notice, but they also look at specific institutions and try to change them. What is your experience in dealing with activism in terms of foreign direct investment?
We favor more those investors who come in here in order to set up production facilities. But there are, of course, those who go into the stock market and the financial area, and their activities are not really, we are not really comfortable with them. For example, pension funds, as they do everywhere, they come in, they buy and push up share prices, and then they dump and they leave, leaving the locals to pay a heavy price because of the collapse of the shares. So there are not too many of them who look at Malaysia as a place for them to invest, and we don't mind. We would rather have retail investors and investors who are really serious about wanting to see growth, and of course they are also interested not just in stock appreciation but also in profitability of the investment.
But the middle income country that you created hasn't moved up since. So they call it the middle income trap. In fact, if anything, China has moved way ahead of Malaysia, and created even more opportunities for its people. So is there a ceiling right now that you think we need to break through, or the country needs to break through?
Well, we want now more and more local investors because they have acquired the skills, the capital, the technology. So we think that our own people will fill in the gap if there should be a shortage of foreign investors. We also noticed that lately foreign investors come in for the property development and are not investing in productive capabilities, and we think there should be a balance. While it is good for them to invest in property, we would like to see more manufacturing done in this country.
You are a big proponent of your own model of an East Asian Economic Caucus. And today, maybe led more by the US, or I would even say hijacked by the US, the TPP, which originally started as a bilateral arrangement for countries like, small countries like New Zealand and Singapore and Brunei and so on. Do you see a difference between the model that you are pursuing and what's developing right now?
We find that when people propose a free trade agreement, normally they look at the advantage that accrues to them, not to their partners. So TPPA, for example, comes from the US, and US sees an opportunity to open up the markets in countries like Malaysia. But we don't have enough to invest in America itself, and we are not able to compete. We may gain some market accessibility for our palm oil and things like that, but we have grown without that market. I have a different view from the government. I don't think free trade agreements are useful, because without free trade agreements, we grew very fast before. We were 17th biggest trading nation in the world without any free trade agreement. And in many ways, a free trade agreement is to prevent free trade, because now you have to conform to the conditions of the agreement. And the conditions like the TPPA are quite restrictive, and you open yourself up to litigation and things like that. So let's just open up the country and trade and respect the needs of the partners for some protection for themselves, because they are just beginning. They are infants in terms of production and all that.
Was that the tone of your negotiations when you were leading some of this?
When I was still Prime Minister, well, accept the need to have free trade agreement with ASEAN countries, for example, but we find that there is a lot of inequality between rich countries and poor countries entering into a free trade agreement which regards them as being equal. They are not equal. So I did not encourage entering into free trade agreement. But after I stepped down, there were more free trade agreements which were, well, the Malaysian government were persuaded to participate.
Right. The FTAs that were pushed after you stepped down, a lot of them had to do with bilateral FTAs. And that was because the WTO itself wasn't working and they had some problems in that regard. What is your sense of how will an East Asia caucus finally come about? If it is true that China is a huge market for Malaysia and India and Indonesia, are large markets that we should or you should tap on, what do you think should be the next steps to create this, this Asian marketplace?
Well, the Asian marketplace, I think, will develop by itself. There was no very restrictive agreements. We saw China as a growing country, becoming very rich, and anybody growing rich must provide a good market for our products. And of course, we have to buy from them also. And we find that enriching people is the best way to improve ourselves. We have a slogan which says, prosper thy neighbor, because when neighbors are prosperous, they give you less problem and they are good markets for us. So that is something that is normally done almost informally, bilaterally. But then came this idea about regional organization. Now in Malaysia, our views about regionalization is simply because the trade negotiations failed, and because they failed, we thought that since they have started the World Trade Organization, we need to protect ourselves, and individual countries, small countries, cannot protect themselves against the Europe and America, for example. So we propose to have an East Asia economic community, so that when we go to the World Trade negotiation, we would have some strength. We will speak with one voice. That was all that we wanted. We don't want to have an association which ties us up to doing trade with each other under certain conditions and all that. We like to discuss common problems before going for negotiation in the World Trade Organization.
You think that APEC provides that voice?
APEC becomes too big, and when they call it APEC, Asia Pacific, we thought that all the Asia Pacific countries should be included, but the tendency has always been to exclude China and Russia. So when we were in APEC, we insist that China and Russia be a member of APEC, and that seems to frustrate a lot of people. That is why now they are talking about the TPPA and the like. And there is also some political nonsense here, because it seems to exclude China, and we are big trading partners of China. We don't want to cut ourselves off.
But what is happening in terms of the China's claim on the coastline, for example, being somewhat aggressive, and the fact that their coastline now goes all the way down to Indonesia? What do you think is happening there, and how easy is it to deal with a partner who is asserting itself in this way?
Yeah, we have to deal with that problem, because China is there, you can't wish it away. We have to live with China being there, and sometimes China can be very aggressive. But whatever it is, we must settle this problem through peaceful means. You see, Malaysia had overlapping claims with Indonesia, with Singapore, with Thailand, and we settled all this problem through negotiation or through a court of law. And we would like to talk with China about these overlapping claims, and I hope that China will eventually understand that war is non-productive. You know, these claims against small islands, again with Japan and all that. If they fight a war, the cost of war will be so high that whatever they may gain in terms of land area will not compensate for the amount of money they have lost.
Well, you recently visited China and you've met the leadership. So what is your assessment in terms of that they will take that negotiated route?
Yeah, but of course they are not. They are quite reluctant because they don't trust these international courts and all that. But we are still talking with them. Their claim, of course, overlaps our development in the South China Sea. But we have our reasons for. I mean, we have basis for making that claim. They say that some old maps they have showed that this is their territory. We need to sit down and talk with them.
And in your time, you were hoping that Japan would be the driver of regionalization, or it will be the linchpin that holds the whole region together. Did Japan disappoint you in any way?
At that time, people were writing about Japan as number one, and obviously we want to copy number one. A successful country. But later on, when Korea developed and then China developed, Japan found itself having to compete. And it's not helped by having the yen revalued upwards so that it becomes no longer competitive. Had there been no Plaza Accord and the yen remains at the old level, they would be able to compete with China and Korea.
But on an uneven footing. In other words, they would have an uneven advantage. And that's what a trading country would like for itself. If anything, it brought it back on the even footing, gave the opportunity to Korea and China to become competitive eventually.
Well, if you look at it from China, from the point of view of China, Korea, and maybe the West, but for Japan, it is grossly unfair that the yen was valued by 300%. We borrowed yen, and suddenly we found that we need a lot of Malaysian currency to pay up our loans in yen. So it didn't pay for us. But we think that 300% revaluation of the yen was too high. And maybe a gradual revaluation would be tolerable. And I think China and Korea would be able to compete with Japan because they have resources, they have good manpower, and they are very skillful people.
Final question. Malaysia as a country, how prepared is it for the future in terms of not just being a destination for investment, but putting out a population that is educated, that is able to take on the opportunities that come in an international marketplace?
When I became Prime Minister, the population of this country was 13 million. And I said that we should have 70 million people because we need a big domestic market to market our products and to test our products. Now we are 30 million. The population of Malaysia is growing. An increase in population is all right provided that the government ensures that they are all employed, they have the skills to be employed to earn bigger income, and therefore the domestic market would in a way replace much of the foreign market. So some countries, of course, like United States, their domestic market is so huge that they are not really dependent upon other trading with other countries. We want to be less dependent on foreign direct investment and foreign markets. So I think the government is working towards a high income economy. Of course, high income means also high cost, But if it is properly done, I think Malaysia can grow, not fast, but you can grow and compete with most other countries in the region.
And meet that 2020 goal that you set many years ago.
Yeah. If they keep to that target and they fulfill all the requirements, I think.
And the chances of meeting that target?
I think they have stressed too much on per capita income. I keep on telling them that developed countries is not about per capita income. If it is per capita income, then Saudi Arabia would be the best developed country. But we need to have industries, we need to have better educated people, more universities, do research, and also we should concentrate on the arts and things like that, so as to ensure that our people are really well balanced, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of their cultural development.
And so on. Actually, the capitalists are thinking that way now. So hopefully, there will be a convergence of view in terms of what you've been saying. Thank you very much for this moment.
Welcome.
Excellent.